everyone, and happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing, the video broadcast series that features the powerful women from the shop floor to the C-suite who are changing the world through engineering and manufacturing. Today, I'm really excited to have Kathy Miller and Shannon Karels. Hi, ladies. How are you?
Hi, Megan. Nice to see you.
You as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I just got done reading your book, Steel Toes and Stilettos. So I'm really excited to talk about that later on in our conversation. But initially, what I would like to start off with is, some background information about both of you and how you started into manufacturing. So, Kathy, do you want to kick us off and kind of explain to us, how you got involved with engineering and manufacturing and if it was something that you always wanted to pursue as a career pathway?
Yeah, absolutely. And the answer to that is no. I did not know anyone in manufacturing. My parents weren't in manufacturing. I didn't know anybody who worked in or around factories growing up. So I discovered manufacturing through a very practical need to finance my my bachelor's degree in industrial engineering. So I had applied for a number of colleges, Kettering University, or at the time it was GMI, Engineering and Management Institute, had this great program where 6 months a year you actually worked in a real world setting and, were paid for that work. And then 6 months you went to school. It was a 5-year program. So it was just a way to get through school without a lot of debt. And that was part of it. So I didn't know anything about it when I stepped on the factory floor. And, as I say in the book, I fell in love with the vehicle assembly plant and the fact that a functioning vehicle comes off the end of the line every 60 seconds. So that's how it started for me.
How about you, Shannon? What were your first steps through your journey into manufacturing?
Yeah, so I will say I also had no intention of ever going into manufacturing or really didn't know a lot of people in it either. I actually was recruited by a large company out of college. So I have a supply chain degree and they were doing a supply chain training program. So it was like a 2-year rotation into multiple plants where you could learn all the functions of supply chain and get into manufacturing. And same with Kathy, like I just started and I fell in love with it. And I loved how the processes were so different in every plant that you went to. And it was like all these puzzle pieces to kind of figure out how to make them work together and work better. So it just was a quick thing that I just fell into and kept my whole career there.
One of the things that you mentioned in the book, Shannon, was you were a gymnast at one point. And I was kind of curious what sort of like skill sets or characteristics from being a gymnast helped you pursuing that type of business degree and some of the things that you do now for manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, I would say I did know at the time I was learning significant time management skills because I was at school or at the gym, and that's all I did 6 days a week. So, and then besides the time management, having to figure out how to make all of those pieces work together and have some kind of life that I wanted to have outside of those events, when I first figured out that I wanted to be in leadership. And although I would say my skills were rough in the beginning, it was such a great just pathway to guide me there. And, besides all the things I look back on now, discipline, dedication, I am a little bit of a perfectionist, which makes some sense coming from gymnastics world. And, the other thing is I'm a little bit relentless. So I think those skills from being a gymnast really drove me into wanting to succeed in the business world.
And then Kathy, one of the parts in the book too, at the very beginning, you kind of explain the story and this experience with your dad going to a facility tour and then having this long interview process with that facility. And there was comments being made. And when you got back to your house and you had this conversation with your dad, it was really interesting in his response because, I think dads are very protective of their daughters. And his response was really interesting from my perspective too, because it kind of showcases the grit that's involved with manufacturing, right? You got certain people that will say certain things. But if you want to get past that, you really have to just have thick skin in this sector. And I think that holds true in certain situations. So can you go into that story a little bit more and kind of explain, what excited you from that facility tour and that interviewing process? Because I think you mentioned it was a 4-hour interview process, and I think that can be intimidating to some people. That's scary. So how did you come to the decision that that's where you wanted to be? What were your favorite things about that tour, even though there were some kind of awkward moments for you?
Yeah, there were a few awkward moments. I don't think people would experience those today. So much of that now is really not acceptable behavior and would be addressed. But back in the day in the plant tour, it was a little bit rougher than the plants that we go into today. But the story is, to go to Kettering or GMI, you had to get your own co-op position. So I went on the interview. I'll be real honest, I was doing it to please my parents because there were other schools that I preferred to go to, quite honestly. So I am the only daughter. I have 3 brothers, and my dad was extremely protective of me. I mean, I think he still had a curfew for me at 24 years old. He was very, very protective. So we went, he's like, I'll drive you to the interview, honey, because I wasn't real familiar with that part of town. So he drove me to the interview, and he sat in the waiting room outside of the HR lobby for 4 hours while I interviewed with the student director, the HR director, the maintenance director, the superintendents. I mean, it was literally 4 hours of meeting the plant leadership. And at the very end of it, they said, do you have a little bit more time? And I said, absolutely. And they said, would you like to go on a plant tour? And I said, well, sure. I've never been in a factory or a vehicle assembly factory, so I think that would be great. And they said, how about the guy in the lobby? Do you think he would want to join us? And I'm like, that's my dad. And sure, I can ask him. So I went out. I'm like, hey, Daddy, want to go on a plant tour? He's like, okay. And we walked through this people door, into a whole different world, because all the interviews had taken place in the front offices that just looked like any other office. And you went through and, opened up this whole different world. There were wood blocks on the floor that were painted black. There was literally a set of train tracks that ran through the center of the plant, and it was 2 stories. And we walked around on the wide aisle tour, which is, a little trick. All of us manufacturing leaders know, not to get too far off the main path. And, we're just seeing all the sub-assemblies and the motor line. And it was mostly men, although I didn't really recognize it at the time. But they were catcalling and hooping and hollering. And I was literally not caring if I looked professional at all. My arm was intertwined with my dad, right? Because I'm like, okay, maybe this will calm people down because they should be respectful to other dads. No, super, really loud and everything. And I was fascinated that every 60 seconds, this working vehicle came off the end of the line. So I really loved the tour. And I was actually really excited that people were acting inappropriate, because I thought my dad would be like, okay, honey, you can go to, one of the Big 10 schools or whatever you want. I don't want you in this environment. So I was like, okay, this was a good day. So we get in the car, we're not talking, we're eating peanut M&Ms that he always kept in the glove box, for good measure. The very next day they called me and offered me a position as a co-op student in industrial engineering. So I said, hang on, let me ask my dad. I mean, I think it's so funny now, right? In an interview, but I was only 17. And so I said, Dad, those people I talked to yesterday, they want to offer me a job. And he's like, oh, okay, great. Just take it. And I said, well, Dad, what about, the fact that people were whistling at me and catcalling? He's like, oh, they didn't mean anything by it. Just go ahead and accept it. It'll be fine. So I was shocked. I was really shocked at his reaction. But I think I think that he was more concerned about the overall objective, of being like, Kathy, you can overcome any environment that you're put in. You don't need to be worried about that. You don't need to be timid about that. And I think that he also had a good sense of the fact that the people were really harmless, right? sometimes those jobs can be boring if people aren't engaged with their hearts and their heads in addition to their hands, and it was just a unique sight. And that went on for the 5 years I was there, but they really were harmless, So I think that was just my dad's way of saying, look, I don't think you're in harm's way, and I think this is for the greater good. So give it a shot. And then, I've been in and around manufacturing ever since. It doesn't happen when I walk through plants anymore. If anybody's worried about that, who's thinking about it.
Well, I know that there's still some instances where there are negative things, but we're trying to overcome that, right? And I think the best
100%.
way to overcome some of those challenges is you have to talk about them, and you have to make people comfortable enough to actually report things when there is something going on that they don't agree with. And I think having these conversations helps. But I relate to that so much because I actually worked in a tooling shop with my dad. He was a VP. My dad and I never really connected on manufacturing until I started Mavens, and he started perking up his ears a little bit. And he's like, "What's this Mavens of Manufacturing I keep hearing you talking about mom with?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm trying to get women excited about engineering and manufacturing because we have the skills gap." And he's like, "Huh." And so now he'll like have conversations with me and tell me stories about his experiences. But we actually worked together in a tooling shop. And I just fell in love with the people on the shop floor because they were some of the realest, most authentic people I've ever met. And they're so passionate about what they're doing because it meant so much to them to have this job because they were supporting their families or their parents, or, they were some of the most hardworking people I've ever met. And I think having those facility tours is really important now, especially to get people excited about manufacturing in the United States again. So I love that story, and I love how your dad had that reaction. It was just like, it was fine.
Very unexpected. It was very unexpected. I thought, yes,
So we have a few people chiming in already, which is great. We have Jeremy, who wanted to know who influenced y'all to be leaders, which I think is a really interesting question because, you can be influenced to be a lot of things, but leadership, I think, can be really intimidating for some people. But you guys both grabbed it by the horns and have done so well. So who have been some of your main influences throughout your journey?
So before I went to GMI, I was actually the class president for 3 years in my high school. So I don't remember any specific person necessarily, but I do remember my parents just bringing me up with a lot of confidence and a lot of courage to just, be who you are and contribute at the level that you're really comfortable. And I always just gravitated to those types of situations because I really wanted to always be part of the solution of making things better than I found them.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Shannon?
Yeah, I think when I look back, I'm going to go back to this. I really think it was my coaches in gymnastics that, they would talk to me a lot about it. Besides just being good at the sport, what I could do to help the team. And so that meant a lot to me, I found very quickly. And my parents as well. I mean, my dad was an entrepreneur. And so he, kind of taught me how you have to lead people to get them to come along with you. So I think that's where it really started for me.
And then we also have Unsal, who said, hello. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. And then we have Tamara, who said, I've been in manufacturing for over 20 years, and I've definitely seen a decline in those negative interactions in manufacturing. And I have too. Yeah. You still have those awkward moments, but I mean, you're going to get that anywhere you go, I think. But again, just having those conversations to help drive those out. And then Unsal, I worked for GM about 18 years, fast environment, great experience. Mm-hmm. And I agree. I think the automotive industry is so interesting. And even with automation coming in now with robotics and everything, it's even getting more interesting because you have new opportunities coming up. But before we touch on that, I really want to start talking about your book because I think I read it. I loved it. I think it's amazing. It's called Steel Toes and Stilettos. Yep. And I wanted to get a background information about that because when we had our pre-briefing, the way that you guys decided to write this book, I thought was just fantastic because I'm from the Midwest. So can you talk about, what the process was, what kind of environment you were in, and how you started these conversations about writing this book and what your main
Sure.
inspiration was for?
Yes. So it is a little bit of a funny story. So Kathy and I, we worked together for the 3 years that we write the book about, and maybe a little bit longer than 3 years. But through the friendship that we created, we definitely became more like family, and sisters, really, than colleagues and coworkers. So we've spent a significant amount of time together after that stage in our lives, and so we were spending a weekend together with our families at Kathy's house. And we, in typical fashion, just decided, hey, it's winter in the Midwest. Let's go hang in the hot tub and maybe, have a couple glasses of champagne. Who knows? So we just started talking about, we were both in transitions in our careers. And so we were talking about how we're both implementing the same lean concepts and trying to build teams in our current roles. And then we started to reminisce and said, gosh, we actually did some pretty great stuff when we were together. And what made that so successful? And then we just started to think about all the stories and the things that we did, and all the silly, crazy things that we came up with to engage people. And we were laughing, and we said, we think this is a great story to share, and maybe it can help people already in the industry, and maybe it can help females or anybody else who wants to get into the manufacturing world and see that two women can not only be successful in it, but also be successful supporting each other. So that was the inspiration that came from why we wrote the book. And then the next day we went home, and I thought about it all night, and so did Kathy. And she texted me the next morning and said, do you still think that's a good idea? And I said, I do. And here's what I think the title should be. Because we started talking about shoes, which is also a great story of how we met.
I think that's so fun because there's actually a company, and it's Xena Footwear. I don't know if you've heard of that company.
Uh-huh.
And I think she's an amazing human being as well. And just to hear her story is fantastic. And immediately I thought about her shoe line, because she understands, I don't think a lot of people know this if you're not a woman in manufacturing, but when you go from the office setting to the shop floor, you have to have the right shoes because of just safety issues. And I always had an extra pair of tennis shoes or steel toe boots in my drawer to transition. So the analogy that you built among the chapters with the different types of shoes that you wore, I thought was just brilliant and really fun. And I just, being a writer, I thought it was great because it is relatable. And I think any woman that's in manufacturing or engineering understands that struggle of trying to figure out, okay, how many pairs of shoes do I need to bring? And especially if you're in an area like the Midwest where we have the 4 seasons, and it's unpredictable whether or not you're going to have to bring boots too because of the snow. But for anyone that's not from the Midwest, sitting in a hot tub in the middle of winter with some sort of adult beverage is a very common experience. It might not be the safest thing, but if you're also looking for a way to generate good ideas, Kathy and Shannon have been proof that you can definitely do that. So what sort of things are you including in the book then? Can you kind of dive into some of the stories that you're sharing and why you thought it was important for other people to know your experiences? Because there is still this gender gap in manufacturing, and now we have this skills gap. And I'm really trying to showcase the whole story of what engineering and manufacturing can be like. And lean manufacturing is such a huge thing in manufacturing right now with processes. So can you share some of those insights about, what's happening in the book?
Sure. Well, Shannon and I met, we were in 2 different roles. And at the time, I was the vice president of Lean Enterprise Quality and Strategy Deployment for this large company. And actually, I didn't pack my safety shoes because all the people the men that I was traveling with around looking at, the plants all over the world were always challenging me to carry on my luggage. And, safety shoes take up half of the luggage. So,
Yeah.
Most of the plants, they always have these, drawers of visitor shoes, but they're generally not amenable to female sizes and that sort of thing. So the shoes was really a pivotal moment that Shannon and I met, because she oversaw and overheard this conversation I was having about what I was going to do, looking at like those, I call them duck shoes, right? But like those plastic inserts you put over your toes and your heels, which I think are more dangerous than maybe, going barefoot. Sometimes they're just so not productive for female shoes. And she offered me her safety shoes so I could go on the plant tour. And fortuitously, we wore the same size. So that was sort of, something special that happened to us. But the stories of the book really starts when I transitioned into a general manager position. I had an opening for a lean transition manager on my staff. She applied. She was the most qualified, mostly from her tenacity, personality, and her supply chain background is invaluable, right? Material and information flow is so, so important in a lean transformation. And we had to fight hard to get her in that position. And you can read all about that in the book. But we really tell about the story, right, of what was the roadmap of the tools that we put in place to build a foundation, right, for inclusivity, for problem solving, for psychological safety, and the order of the lean tools that we put in place in a manner that built on each other, but also included people, all the people, right? Everybody in the whole enterprise to help make value flow. And so I was looking at things from a senior leadership position, right? Because I had all the functions. I had HR, I had finance, I had to ensure profitability. And Shannon's job was to wake up every morning and make sure she was influential in getting all of her peers and their teams to adopt the lean practices. So we talk a lot about not necessarily the calculations, right? Pull card calculations. And there is so much math when you're implementing lean, but really what are the skill sets required to help paint that vision for people who haven't seen anything like that, and then have them be involved in helping define how things are done and how they improve and sustain themselves. So that's what you'll hear. And you'll also hear a lot of our personal anecdotes along the way. So we really share that story of friendship because we think it's just so important that people are kind to each other and support each other in the workplace. And, sometimes that doesn't happen. So we wanted to get that story of positivity out in the world as well.
Yeah. And I think that's really important too, because in some of these old school manufacturing companies that have been around for a really long time, who are looking to improve, what their production process, change is a really scary thing and it's really hard. And if you're switching from leadership to leadership and bringing in new people, you still have that loyalty too, right? That you kind of have to fight to be a part of, because you're a brand new person. They don't have that trust factor with you. And then you're saying, hey, what you were doing that was working for you, we're going to change it all up. So what tips can you provide to some manufacturers today who are going through the lean process to really get that trust from their employees? Because without them signing on, it's going to be a really, really difficult journey to have a lean transformation. What are some of the tips what are some of the practices that you learned that were really helpful and made it a quick transformation process? I don't want to say quick because it's not a quick transformation process. It doesn't happen overnight. But what were some of the favorite things that you did to make it work?
And I'll Kathy, add on to this. I'll just put a few out there. But Kathy always talks about, and she taught me this, was you have to paint the vision first. So you have to be able to articulate where you want to go and what that end game looks like. Now, even with the most well-articulated vision doesn't necessarily mean people will buy into it or believe it. So it just takes, that part of it takes exactly what you said, time, trust, building those relationships. And that's really how we did it. Was we built relationships by constantly communicating with the teams, telling them about the change that was going to come up, walking them step by step, helping to show them what good looks like, because oftentimes they can't even envision how in the world you're going to get to this end state. So for me, those were the two biggest things, was creating the vision and then communicating with the team and building that trust through relationships.
Well,
and you
one of the
can't
things that
waver.
I liked about some of the things that you shared in the book, Shannon, was you actually got in there yourself and got your hands dirty. You were
Yeah.
working alongside with these employees
Mhm.
and building relationships that way, which I think is really great because, I think some people that are on the shop floor that have been doing this for 30 plus years, they don't like people coming in and saying, hey, this is what's going to work when they've been doing something so long. And so if you can, it's kind of like, I don't want to say this in an insulting way, but when I want my sons to do something, I crouch down, and I get on their level and I ask them questions and try to get an understanding of it. So showing that, hey, I'm here to learn as well as to lead, I think is really important.
Well,
But
and there is the fine line too, just to follow up on that. There is that fine line of you set the vision, but how you get there is different. So,
yeah,
learning what those people have to offer is they know the best of how it works. And then to your point, being able to ask them, well, what would you do? How would you fix this? I mean, I didn't know anything about giant hot presses and how to make parts that way. They taught me. And then we figured out together. So I think you're exactly right that it does take that collaboration.
and Kathy, what do you have to add to that? What were some of the favorite things that you learned along the way that helped?
I think that you cannot delegate a business transformation when you're the leader. You can't just say, look, I've done this 30 times. It's going to work in this environment. Trust me. You have to be present. You have to be present with the people providing the value, whether they're working at a press or they're doing the accounts payable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And be there and be an active listener. So I just think that's huge. And I think the other piece of it is just facing the realities of what's going on. Typically, when you're starting a big transformation like this, you're pretty far from where you want to be, and you may also be facing failed attempts from previous administrations or people just waiting you out because they feel like this is going to be the next program of the month, and they have been through numerous leaders and they're just going to grin and bear it till you move on. So you're facing all those sorts of things. So spending as much time as you can where the value is created and experiencing those high quality connections where you're doing active listening and you're really trying to understand what people are struggling with and what they believe will work well and giving those things a chance. And if they fail, and many times they're successful, but if they fail, there's psychological safety, right? As long as you're not doing something that impacts the customer in terms of quality or safety, for your workforce, experimentation needs to be encouraged. And when it doesn't work out, you share the lessons learned, but you also celebrate successes very publicly and, hold people up and thank them for their contributions in making the work better, making the business better, getting the results that you need to get that nobody had experienced previously.
I think that was another good portion of the book that I really enjoyed seeing is that you did encourage working together, but also providing this safe environment where, okay, if you mess up, that's fine. What didn't work about this process and what do we need to change? And it was kind of like trial and error a lot of the times until you got it right. And I think that's so important for the next generation to know. I've had a lot of conversations with other women where they were mentors to these kids. And while they're going through their college courses and trying to figure out what to do for the rest of their lives, they get so anxious because they think that they have to be perfect in every way. And one woman in particular, she is a professor of engineering in Colorado. She's like, I had to be conscious and mindful of always letting them know, if this doesn't work, it's okay. Like, you're not getting graded on the success. You're getting graded on, okay, how is the thought process and where did it lead to? Okay, that didn't work. So then what's the next step? And just getting them to ask why. And she's like, I think we need to do a better job with prepping them for these moments, especially with interviews, to get comfortable with themselves and having them know that if they don't know the answer to something, that's okay. We're supposed to be curious and try to figure these things out. So I really enjoyed those parts of the books too, where you gave a lot of detail of where you were successful and then where it wasn't so successful, and then what you did to change some of those things. So we have a couple comments too. Ron said, this is a very interesting and fun discussion. I hope you guys are seeing these comments, because I got a notification that some of these comments weren't being shown. So I'll do my best. But Arun Shen said, very interesting and fun conversation. Will Healy added this book to my Goodreads list. Really looking forward to reading it. Kara Branch. I love Kara. I'm going to talk to her soon. But she has this nonprofit organization to get Black girls engineering. And I'm really excited to share her story. So I'm really glad that Kara's here. But she said, I worked in petrochemical and I kept my steel toes on site, and there was no room for stilettos because the gravel and other uneven surfaces would have led to a safety incident. I only wore heels to corporate office. I think that's why I like Xena Footwear so much too, because her shoes are actually really fashionable and they have the steel toe protective. So I'm actually excited to get a pair of those. And then Tamara, Jeremy Lorino, automation doesn't eliminate jobs. It changes how jobs look. I think it provides better, safer, physically easier opportunities. It is also necessary right now because of the labor shortage. Oh, I think there's a conversation going on that I missed part of it. That's okay.
All good.
But a couple other questions that I wanted, I'm trying to hide that comment, I'm sorry. A couple other questions that I wanted to ask you about too. One, I'll start with you, Kathy. You have a degree in psychology, correct? That's one of the things. So I was curious to know how that has helped you with some of your leadership positions within manufacturing. How do you apply what you've learned through getting that psychology degree to some of the situations that you deal with in manufacturing? Because I find that there's a connection between the two. So I just wanted to hear your insights on that.
Well, 100%. I wanted to be a psychologist when I was doing the engineering school thing, and so I've always been fascinated with, the brain and neuroplasticity and helping people, have healthy minds and that sort of thing. But life took over and I had kids and, was doing this dual career marriage situation. So I just went back for my master's degree last year. So I was working full time as a global leader of operating systems at a company, and then working all night on my master's degree in applied positive psychology from Penn. So the people who I worked with in corporations didn't get the benefit, although I will say that a lot of the things I learned were synergistic with my leadership style. Mm-hmm. But in this next part of my career in Op Sisters with Shannon, a lot of what I learned is there is really a scientific basis for these concepts of human flourishing for individuals, for teams of people, and for corporations. And I did my thesis on it. And so our advising clients and our coaching clients now get the benefit of understanding the science behind all of those things that help these transformations be successful and help get better business results. So this next part of my career, those people will get, the benefit of knowing the science behind it as well, particularly with regard to optimism, positive workplace relationships, and providing the opportunity for people to be involved in meaningful work.
I think that's awesome. It's such it's goes back to, you know, a happy employee is more productive. So I think it's really great to start understanding, you know, the psychology of your employees, especially if they might be having a hard time because they're not going to be as productive. And it's really good to like be able to catch on to that. So I'm excited to see more content from you if you're deciding to create that on how that's going. And good luck on your continued education, because it's hard. College is not for everyone. I remember getting my master's degree, and then my mom is trying to convince me to get my doctorate, and I'm like, no, thanks, I'm done. I don't want to do that anymore.
I would never say never, but I didn't think I'd be going for a master's degree, a second master's degree at this stage of my career either, you know, but I think I've got what I need to help our clients right now.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, good luck to you. And then Shannon, you mentioned too that, you know, what got you started, you had an internship. And I think internships, especially apprenticeships, job shadowing, are very important to really help kids who are trying to figure out what they want to do to get that hands-on experience. So I wanted to get more details from you about what that experience was like for you and how it actually helped you kind of have the, because I think one of the areas where we can improve a little bit more in trying to close that skills gap is providing more opportunities and being proactive when students are at that stage trying to figure out what they want to do for the rest of their lives. Because I feel like that's still a challenge where kids are going through high school and they're just like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm not really good at math. So if they're not good at a certain area, they might think that this isn't a place for them to be. Yeah. So can you give us more detail on what your internship was like and what you liked about it and some of the things you might not have liked about it and how it really helped shape you into the leader you are today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I will say I had, that was like, I think my only acceptance letter that I got. I think I had about 20 other rejection letters. So I will say a few things about that whole process is I was a terrible interviewer. I did not know myself well enough to know what my strengths and my weaknesses were at that point. So I wish I would have had somebody to help me through that and see myself a little bit better. But once I got the one, I had to move out of state alone. I didn't know anybody. So, you know, aside from all the work stuff, I had to go and learn how to be completely independent, learn how to be alone and meet new people, which we talked about being an introvert is challenging to put yourself out there and meet new people that way. I found it to be a matter of survival. So I had to kind of push all those feelings down to be somewhere and make it worth my while. The internship process was great. I was in a specific packaging and purchasing internship at a automotive industry. And I learned so much, not only from the process, I learned things I liked and things I didn't. So I knew that that wasn't going to be my career path, but then I learned about all the other opportunities there were. So I had a great group of mentors at that place that helped me see myself more clearly of what I was good at and what maybe not so much. I got to go visit suppliers. I got to do all these things I could have never imagined, which helped prepare me to get a full-time job. So it was such a wonderful experience. I think I would encourage everyone to do it. It was a requirement for my degree. And I would encourage everyone coming out of college to do it, because even though maybe it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, I knew what I didn't necessarily want to do, which is also just as powerful when you're going through your career.
Absolutely. I think high schools need to start incorporating them more too, instead of making them an option. Because I know with some of the courses that I took when I was in high school, they were electives. We didn't have to necessarily take them as a requirement to graduate. But like you said, it helped you figure out what you wanted to do and what you didn't want to do. Yeah. But it also helps with that interview process. I think that's one skill a lot of people miss out on. And it's a good place to start with high school students, because especially now with everyone being on their phone all the time, I know my daughter can be socially awkward when she gets face to face with people because she's so used to communicating with a screen. And I'm trying to work on her now, just getting uncomfortable with that. Cause I told her, I was like, if you can't talk to people face to face, it's really going to hinder you from growing and getting far, because it's okay to ask questions with people. And I think it's easier to do that when you're face to face with people. So she's working on now not texting me all the time. Like she'll actually call me, which is weird for me because I'm so used to her texting me, and she'll call me and I'm like, is everything okay? She's like, yeah, I just wanted to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
That's great.
You're improving. That's working. All right. Now, Kathy, you mentioned Op Sisters, and that's something both of you co-founded together. So can you explain what Op Sisters is and what you're trying to do with that journey?
Absolutely. So Shannon and I have partnered up and have started our business where we are working with individuals, teams, and companies that want to improve their results through creating inclusive cultures and or implementing lean methodologies. So we are doing speaking engagements now. Of course, our first endeavor was getting the book out. So thank you for having us on and letting us spread the word. But that's what we're doing right now. So on our website, you can see the different offerings that we have. I know that we've talked a lot about different memories through the years. So we've got a blog out there. We've got a coaching program that we work with individuals, teams, and or companies on creating these efficacious manufacturing environments. Everybody wants me to change the name of that coaching program because nobody knows what efficacious means, but it's effective, but with a magical power, right? And I love that definition. So I don't know, I may do a LinkedIn survey to see if, I really have to change that. And we also have a training course on meaningful transformations, meaningful lean transformations. So it's this order of approach that you see in the book, but also those aspects of the environment that help it be adopted more readily and sustain itself. So that's what we're doing now. We love working together. We have some separate clients, but we have talks together and clients together, and are just trying to get, first of all, manufacturing organizations to be strong today. We really want manufacturing to be strong going forward to provide wonderful jobs for people, and also get that next generation of manufacturing leaders ready to create these types of environments and enjoy the successes.
Absolutely. Shannon,
Yeah.
So I wanted to pick on you a little bit because, as you mentioned before, we did talk about our struggles with being introverts, because I too am an introvert. I'm a really shy person. I blame my sister, who's 14 months older than me. When we were growing up, she always talked for me. So when we separated ways, I really had to work on my communication skills and putting myself out there. With your friendship with Kathy, because I love seeing you two together, because you can tell that you're more than just friends. You're basically sisters, and you have such a high respect for each other. And this is probably a question for you too, Kathy, but how has your relationship helped you in manufacturing? And what are some of your favorite moments with each other? Because that's what I want to show people. Manufacturing is a great sector to build fun, long-lasting relationships. It's a great place to be. It's filled with a lot of challenges, but it's also filled with a lot of great value and great memories, and you're creating things with your hands, and you're helping people, and you're helping how we live today. So how has your friendship really helped you thrive in your career pathway?
I love that question. And yes, we do love each other and spending time together. So Kathy and I are very, very different people. Yes, we're both women, but we are almost polar opposites when it comes to that. So Kathy is very visionary. She's very strategic. She builds trust with people very easily. And people just love to follow her because of her personality and how authentic she is. I'm much more introverted. I'm more analytical and organized. And, I'm more of an executor. So I can take a vision and figure out every detail to get it cross the finish line. So that's part of how we work so well together, is we complement each other. And Kathy, she is such a strong leader that I can't explain how much I learned from her and the type of leader I wanted to be. And I definitely wasn't that when we first started working together. So that has helped my career tremendously, is having a mentor that I looked up to, that I could learn from and then apply those same elements. Now, there were definitely times that we did not get along, and we do share some of those stories in the book, which is, we laugh about it now. And there's times where I'll say I'm still mad at you because of that. But it's just part of the process. It's part of getting there. And you do develop these incredibly deep relationships when you're going through these transformations, because you do need everybody to work together. And so the more you get to know these people as people and not as their roles, the more successful these types of changes can be. And Kathy helped me and all of us to be able to be our authentic selves, to make that happen. And I've taken that throughout my career going forward with all the teams I've led since then, to allow them to do that as well. And it's just really powerful and successful.
Kathy, what about you?
Well, first of all, Shannon is so right. We're so different, but she is an amazing leader as well. And she's very good at executing things. She can think through all the steps and those sorts of things. And she was very receptive to the leadership and contributed to the team in an amazing way. And we just learned that, sometimes reaching our goals has to be a little slower when we have to bring along 700 people or whatever. And, for Shannon, who's a high achiever, that's super frustrating, right? Because she's got these goals, she understands the vision, and that's what she wants to do. And, over time, it was so wonderful to see her grow. I mean, she's quite a bit younger than I am. As a matter of fact, she's right in the middle of age between myself and my daughters. And so she is able to, be in that gap and be friends with my daughters, and I trust her with my daughters, and be friends with me. And as our relationship has transitioned from, team leader, team member, boss, subordinate, whatever you want to call it, to friends, and more like sisters, I rely on her for so many things. She has so much wisdom and so many different experiences. And I think that we were so lucky that we met each other. And we just think that, be open to people who aren't the same age as you, or the same gender, or the same sexual orientation, right? People are people. And you get so much more when you're open to relationships and learning from each other. And we definitely had our moments, the tugger carts, is one such moment you'll read about, where she went stomping out of my office, and I was like, you know what? I wear those same size shoes. Like, let's not be, messing up the heels. I may want to borrow those. But what was like legitimately mad at me for days, And when she left the office, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just got to get back to my 400,000 things, that are on the list. But I knew we would always work it out, because, we cared about each other. We cared about the team. We cared about every member of the team. And it was safe for us to challenge each other. It really was. And neither of us are great losers, right? And so you can't always get your way. And sometimes she was right, and sometimes I was right. But we always found our way through it, just like we did with our peers, or the people whose processes we were trying to improve. At the end of the day, recognize people, develop relationships, have the shared values to get results. So you've got strong businesses for people to support their families. And the rest has been, for the two of us, an amazing bonus, for sure.
Jeremy asked an interesting question. Have you turned down a company because you don't agree with their culture or methods? And I think that's an interesting question.
as clients.
Yes, or
Yeah.
maybe even a possible employment opportunity as well. Because I've done that.
Yes.
I'll be
Mhm.
very transparent. Yes, I've done that because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're going to be unhappy, right? But I think with a leadership position, as the two of you have been in, have you ever walked away like not accepted to be a leader of a company because you thought there was lost hope of change, or have you wanted to work with the company because you knew that it needed help in changing the culture and the value that was there?
I would say yes to both. As Kathy mentioned, the clients that we want to work with want to do that meaningful transformation, not just put in the tools, which can be done, but that's just not what we believe in when we want to make businesses successful and sustainable. So yes, and I will also say, from a career standpoint, yeah, I mean, it has to be a fit both ways. So even though the company may need the help and whatever else, you've got to know in your gut whether or not it's going to be a good fit. Now, I will say that I have had an experience where I didn't know what the culture was really like until I got there after a few years, and I made a very difficult decision to leave the team that I loved and had built up, because it wasn't good for my mental health. It wasn't good for my family's well-being, and I had to make a change. And those are tough decisions to make.
Yeah.
But you can get through them.
Absolutely.
100%. And I think one thing that's healthy about the upcoming generations is, back when I got hired at my first job, my parents were so excited. They felt I won the lottery, right? And that I joined this blue chip company that, was going to employ me for life, and I was going to have the security. And the world is not that way so much anymore, right? There's a lot of things that have to happen, spin-offs and acquisitions and all sorts of things. And I think that at this day and age, there's no reason to stay in a toxic environment, especially if it's impacting you negatively. And sometimes when you start somewhere, it's not toxic and it becomes that way. And sometimes other parts of the company have a little bit of a different culture and personality. So I'm a huge fan of loyalty, but I'm also a huge fan out of creating and spending the time and energy that I'm going to have on this earth somewhere where I can make a difference.
Yeah,
absolutely. And, I hate to say this, but one benefit about the skills gap is there's a lot of opportunities within engineering and manufacturing, and there's a lot of great companies who are struggling to find that skilled talent, and they are willing to go above and beyond to help their employees, not just with upskilling and retraining, but continuous improvement, where they're like, hey, if you want to take this course and learn how to do this, we'll pay for your tuition or we'll reimburse you. And it's actually a really great time to be in engineering and manufacturing, because if you don't quite know yet what you want to do, you can explore, and usually the companies that you work for will help you pursue that dream and pay for it financial wise. So that's my plug for closing the skills gap. But before I let you ladies go, I wanted to ask you one final question, because we are facing the skills gap. And one of the things I wanted to focus on with Mavens is really inspiring the next generation workforce. And a colleague of mine who I'm part of this group called Manufacturing Mafia. And our goal is to just share content and actually be proactive within our own communities. So I work with a lot of my local economic development company or organizations and high schools and middle schools. And I'm really putting myself out there because I want to be that bridge that connects, the pain points of the high schools with the manufacturing pain points, and make introductions where I can. And one of the members of the group that I'm a part of shared a post about how some professionals would not want to join manufacturing. And I thought that was interesting because I think there's so many amazing opportunities, but I only know of them because I'm involved in the sector. So I wanted to get your opinion of why should the next generation workforce or the next generation students come join manufacturing and engineering? What do you absolutely love about this sector that they would be missing out on if they decided to go somewhere else? And I'm sorry to the other opportunities that I'm trying to pull them away from, but that we need it. We need to have a strong manufacturing foundation for our country to be stable. So what would you tell them about this sector? What would your pitch be?
Go ahead, Kath.
I am so passionate about manufacturing for even all the challenges and, some of the funny stories that I shared, because I feel like there's very few places besides manufacturing where there is room for everybody, right? You can work with your hands. You can work in finance. You can contribute and add value to real tangible things that the world needs to make it a better place. And I just don't think there's any other sector out there, I'm a little biased like you are, Meaghan, where we can provide those types of jobs and people have the opportunity to contribute as you can in manufacturing. So that's why I think I fell in love with it. I just fell in love with that reality, right? Of cars pumping out every day, right? Or you're making electrical components so you can cool children's hospitals, right? Like everything you do in manufacturing is going to connect to something that makes the world a better place in a very real and tangible way. And it's exciting to be a part of that. It really is. It's addictive.
It is. And I think it's easy to find a purpose in manufacturing. A lot of people are looking for purpose in their jobs and in the things that they're doing in life. And I think it's such a great industry to be able to provide that purpose, not just for yourself, but as Kathy said, the rest of the world as well. And everybody has their own unique skills and talents. And I feel that manufacturing is such a great industry to tap into all of them. You don't have to have one unique skill to thrive in this industry. It needs all of them. So I think that there's just so much opportunity from that perspective. And then to learn, my goodness, the way manufacturing's changed since we started, and we talk about automation and just programming and all the amazing technology that's coming through, isn't going to take away from what manufacturing really is. It's going to help get this younger generation who is very digital into this world. And we need more of that. We have to be more efficient to keep manufacturing in the US. And you're right. We need that industry to be a stable country. So come on in. It's a lot of fun.
I agree. Because I feel like I had the misconception that I needed to be good at math and science to be part of engineering or manufacturing. So I stayed clear away from it. And the only reason why I got involved is because my writing ability. I became a technical writer. But I feel like, you don't have to be good at math or science. You don't have to go to a 4-year college if you don't want to. You can earn and learn and get that hands-on experience and become an expert. I know some people who are retiring at like 45, 50 years old because they started early, and I'm just completely blown away that like you're able to just not have to work at that age. Like that's amazing. So I absolutely agree. Gwen Bradley joins us on YouTube, and she said, "What a great sisterhood between Kathy and Shannon. Thanks for sharing your stories, ladies." So before I let you go, I do want to inspire all of you who are watching today to please go check out Steel Toes and Stilettos. It is a fun book. It's so inspiring. It's not just for women, it's for anyone in manufacturing. It has some really good stories and experiences that both Kathy and Shannon experienced together. And it's just a great book to learn more about lean transformation and some of the things that they experience. So Kathy and Shannon, if anyone has any questions for you, even before they purchase the book or after they read the book, what's the best way to contact you, and where would you like them to visit?
Yeah, going to the website, opsisters.com. That's OPS, shared S, ISTERS.com. And they can connect with us through there. There's a tab that says, let's start a conversation, and that'll take us right to our email. And we'll be happy to speak with anybody.
Awesome. And if you read the book, Please, please, please put a review up on Amazon if you get it from Amazon. I know how it is to have something written and then it's not being seen, and reviews matter, and it would be really helpful for Kathy and Shannon if you offered a review. I'm actually going to go do that myself because I just finished the book. So please, please, please do that. And thank you again, Kathy and Shannon. I really appreciate your time today. You are amazing people and you're so inspiring, and I'm very blessed that you took some time today to come on to Meaghan. So thank you very much. And to everyone that joined us today, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Feel free to contact Kathy and Shannon, and hopefully we can meet in person because I would love to shake your hand and thank you personally for such a wonderful book.
Thank you, Meaghan.
We look forward to that.
Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Meaghan.
This has been another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. Subscribe for more and make sure to tune in next time.